Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Brittany. If you don't know, we are in the process of looking at the personal narrative writing unit that I have provided in my Teachers Pay Teachers store titled Creating Writing Warriors. If you've never been to this channel or if you have just clicked into this video, I want you to go visit the first video that's up in that right hand corner and watch the whole thing through so that you know kind of what's going on and more about the product that we're talking about today. So I have three different piles of materials here to go through. We have the lesson plans. We just looked at how the lesson plans are formatted. Now we're going to look at what's in the lesson plans. I have the personal narrative writing process packet that your students are going to work on as they go through this unit plan. And then I have other materials that are provided in the unit plan for your students to use, and then there's also some materials that the teacher will use or that you will use as you go through the unit plan. This is going to be the longest video, so let's jump right in. I think the best way for me to do this is to show you the lessons and then pack it side by side and then pull out the materials, the extra materials as we need them. So I'm going to go hide those. And we're going to start with lesson 1. If you've already watched the videos before this, you know that this is the introduction to the genre. You have your materials needed, which is the guided notes, which I'll pull out in a second, and the personal narrative writing process packet, which is this lovely packet right here. So students are jumping into this genre, and typically I did this at the beginning of the year, so we need to go over what a personal narrative is and look at some model texts. So first thing we do in the introduction is we talk about what's a personal narrative, and to do that we use the guided notes. I love guided notes, especially for the upper and elementary students, because they're note-taking, but they're not note-taking fully independently yet. So guided notes like this just offers an opportunity for them to work on their note-taking skills while also being guided through that, scaffolded through that. So this is what the students will see. They have some words, but they also have some blank spots, and so their goal is to look and listen to what you, the teacher, has to say and fill in those gaps. There's always going to be a teacher version that is provided with these guided notes, and you will see that that one is filled out. The gaps that are provided are typically keywords or things that I really wanted that my students to focus on. So those will be where the spaces are, so that they're really listening and they're paying attention to those keywords. You can choose the best way that you think you can present this. You could make a Google Slides with it. You could, or PowerPoint. You could have it on a doc cam. You could just speak and hope that the students are listening to you. It wouldn't be my first suggestion, but if you feel like your students are ready for that, go for it. However you want to present this information so that they can find the keywords that are missing. So first lesson, they go through that, so they know what a personal narrative is and how it fits into the creative writing genre. Then they will go through the 2 model texts. I have presented them. I have the author and the title listed, as well as different ways that you can access the title if you don't have it in your library. There's YouTube links, or there's Epic links, or things like that if you can't find the actual physical copy, or you can read the physical copy to your students. So they will read those to see what a personal narrative looks like from a published works point of view. Then there are 2 examples for student texts, and those are 5th grade students that have written personal narratives, and there's a good example and there's a not so good example, so they get to see the differences and see what the expectation is for them when they finish their personal narratives. After that, you will hand out this lovely packet to them, and they put their name on the beginning of the packet, but then there's also spaces on each page for them to put their name, so they get back into that habit of writing their name. And then also, if for some reason the packet becomes unstapled, or you want them to turn in one page so you can just check their work before they move on, you have the opportunity to do so. So for the first lesson, at the end of the lesson, students, or at least for their independent work, students are given this packet and they just get to brainstorm what they want to write about. So they flip to this first page, which is page 1, which is brainstorm, and you can see the directions here. It says brainstorm 6 possible stories, events, or life experiences that you could write about for your personal narrative. Then mark which idea you like best. So they'll write 6 ideas, and then they can do this independently, or you can take them at the end and have them all do this together. They will choose which one they want to do best, and then just mark it however works best for you. They can star it, they can highlight it, they can circle it, whatever way to mark which one they're choosing that you like. And that is the end of lesson 1. Moving on to lesson 2, you will see materials needed, the writing process, guided notes. And again, this is best to use at the beginning of the school year when students are just coming back from summer. So a lot of times they'll need a refresher on what the writing process is and the steps that take to go there. And then they will use personal narrative writing process packet pages 1 and 2, which is right under there. So same thing with the writing process guided notes as it was with the personal narrative guiding notes. They get one that looks very similar, just the title's different and obviously the words are different, but the border is the same. And then you will get a teacher version that you can use. Again, make a slideshow with the information, .cam this, however you want to do it so that the students can get the keywords. They go through what the writing process is. Then they get to visit their page 1 again to refresh their memory about which option they chose. And then they get to do a brain barf. They get to do a pre-writing activity, a brainstorming activity, however you would like to present that information to them. So how this works is you choose a time that works best for your class, considering where their writing stamina is and how old they are. Suggested times are 5 to 7 minutes, but you can change that how you need to. You can also offer, there's only 1 page of the brain barf, so if you have some students that like to write a lot more than others, you might provide them some extra line paper in case it doesn't, their writing doesn't fit this provided surface. Then you time them, and your goal is to keep them writing the whole time about their event that they chose. If they cannot come up with anything, then they can do the whole A, B, C, D, E, F till they come up with a different idea. But the idea is just to get their writing stamina up and get them writing down anything they can think about of that event so that they are getting ideas out without having the limitations that sometimes come with trying to write a cohesive first draft. So this is essentially their first draft in a less stressful setting. And so that is what lesson 2 is. Lesson 3 is going to focus on creating a timeline. So there's a couple things here. This is a little bit of a longer lesson. So you will have the sequencing story activity. And so we're just talking about how do we develop a story that has a proper timeline and that shows events in chronological order. So their first activity they're going to do is the sequencing story strips. And in these sequencing story strips, there's a little bit of prep work for this. You will print this out, and then either you or you can guide your students to do this as well. We'll cut out the story strips. Then, either as a group or independently, whatever works best for you, the students will organize these strips into chronological order. And so they're able to do this with the sheet provided. I can get to it right here. So this is their timeline, and then they will just place the story strips in the order that they think happens in the story. So first would be at 1, last would be at 13, and then they go in order. Then you will walk around and check. There is an answer key provided for you if you need it that you can use to walk around and check their storylines. If their storylines are all in chronological order, then they've completed the activity and they can either help another group or they can sit quietly and work on other things while the rest of the group finishes up, however you want to do that. And then you all can go over it together at the end. This is just a good refresher on how to write stories from beginning to end, which is how most personal narratives are presented, and how to talk about some transitional words. First, secondly, finally, After that, they get to create their own timeline, and so they're going to work on this for 2 days. That's why I said it's a little bit of a longer assignment. So the first day, they're just writing the events that happened in their story, in the personal narrative, in the chronological order where it happened. So they'll have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Again, if you have students that like to write a lot, then you can provide them some extra lined paper if they need more than 7 steps. Once they are done, they are going to actually highlight to double check their work and make sure that they have beginning events at the beginning, middle events at the middle, and then their final events of the story at the end. And so the way they're going to do this is at the bottom. It says green means go, so highlight the events that belong in the beginning of your story in green. Highlight the events that belong in the middle of your story in yellow. And since red means stop, highlight the events that belong at the end of the story in red. If they do this correctly, then you'll see green at the top, yellow at the middle, and red at the bottom. So it's a really easy way for you as a teacher to check their work and make sure that they're understanding how to place events chronologically. You can just glance at it. Yep, yellow, green, yellow, red, good to go. And that is the end of that lesson. Switching to lesson 4, we're continuing on with that timeline and stoplight draft. There is a teacher example provided for you to show maybe if I can get it out, for you to show your students at the beginning of the class. So in this example, you can see the story that I provided. It's written in chronological order, and then it is highlighted as the directions say. And you can see, yep, green, yellow, red, good to go. Then we flip to the second example, and we can kind of see how this will work in this stoplight draft, which they have the exact same stoplight provided on page 4 of their packet. So we can see that the sentences at the beginning were put in that green stoplight, the sentences in the middle were put at the yellow one, and then the sentences that were in red are in red. At this point, your students may not have a whole lot of actual written words in their story because they're still at the beginning of the drafting stage, but this is just a good way to see that everything's put in chronological order, and we can build from there. So that's what they're doing on day 4. You provide them this teacher example and then help them move their sentences that are on the timeline and put them into the stoplight draft. So if you're following along, that's the second draft that they've done already. Then lesson 5 is called zeroing in. And so we are going to talk about how do you show your reader what happened rather than just telling them. So they have another set of guided notes, and it's the showing, not telling guiding notes. Same format as before. Here's the student version, and then here's the teacher version. And I like this one because it has a lot of examples to show the students the difference between like describing an event and just flat out telling the reader what happened. So you can see the first example is which is better. The first one is the dog walked down the street. That's telling our reader what happened. And then using descriptive words is the second example, which says the shaggy chestnut shades the collie's coat shimmered in the sunlight with every trot of his feet as he prodded down the coarse, hot concrete. So hopefully your students can recognize that that second sentence is a lot more engaging to the reader than the first. Once we've gone through those guided notes, they get an opportunity to choose 2 sentences from their stoplight draft. They will write the original sentences here, and then they will revise those sentences using those descriptive words to spice up their stoplight draft. Moving on to lesson 6. Here we're going to talk about our characters and making sure that our characters are described rather than just told to the reader, and that we write about our characters in ways that help the reader engage with them. In the introduction, they have a little bit of an activity where they use 3 words to describe themselves, and then we talk about how you would create a sentence that describes yourself using these words, and then they do the exact same thing and they're creating characters. So you can see in the example, I use character's name, mom, character traits, kind, caring, and looks just like me, and then a written evidence to show that to your readers. So my example was, my mom, who is a spitting image of myself, stands in the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand. She smiles at me as I walk into the room. "How are you today?" she asks. And so using this template, the students are going to choose 2 to 3 of their characters. They probably won't have more than 3, but if they do, they can continue on to this or with this. They will choose some traits that describe their character, and then they will create a written evidence sentence or 2 to show the reader that. This was challenging for students. So for this lesson, you're really going to have to walk around the room and provide some examples. Maybe you want to expand on my examples and use somebody in your own life and show them how to do this. But when they do this, it really does take their writing to the next level. So it's very important. Moving on to lesson 7. Here we start to see students, some students work faster than others because we're getting into final drafts and things of that sort. So lesson 7 is deeper draft. The only thing you need is page 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the packet. So it's just things with the packet. First things first, we go over our rubric because now we're getting into a more polished version of our personal narrative. So we're going to talk about what the expectations are for this personal narrative. I have the rubric provided for you as a material, and it's also in the student packet for the students, so they can always look back at it. And then they're going to take their information from the last 2 lessons, so the zeroing in and the character creation pages, and they're going to expand on their stoplight drafts with those materials. So they're going to create a deeper draft that has the same chronological order as their stoplight draft, but then has developed their characters and their descriptive words a little bit more. And that will provide a draft that you can look at as a teacher and give feedback for. So that's page 8, lesson 7. Lesson 8 is going to be writing conferences. This is going to take at least a day, if not 2, if not 3, depending on your class size and the time that students are taking to do that. For these writing conferences, we really want to focus on the content that the students provide rather than working on any grammar errors or spelling errors. So you are going to be provided with this writing conference sign-up sheet that you can use. You can choose how to use this. You have a name for students and time, and then just a second column in case you have more than 15 students. So you can choose to put in the time yourself. Typically about 15-minute increments works well, and then have the student sign up on their own. You can assign students based on where they are in their deeper drafts or where they finish their deeper drafts in the previous lesson, or you can convert this to an Excel spreadsheet and share it with your students that way if you use Google Classroom. So when they come to meet with you, they will take their deeper drafts, and you are going to be looking at the content parts of the rubric. So student tells a story about a real event or experience that happened to them. Student places the events in order chronologically, and then student uses descriptive language to describe characters and situations. And so they're going to provide you the deeper draft. You're going to look at it and provide some feedback for them. And then if you look at page 10 of their packet, you can see the writing conferences on the top. And then what they're doing while you are providing them feedback is they're writing 3 suggestions that you gave them that they can use to create their final draft. Once they are done with their writing conferences, then they will move on to page 11 and 12 of their packet, which is the feedback fun draft. So this is technically lesson 9, where this is lesson 8, but this is where you're going to see students kind of break off into different parts. So some people will still be working on their deeper drafts, some people will be in their writing conferences, some people will be working on their final drafts. So all of these lessons kind of intertwine. So lesson 9, they're going to take the feedback that you gave them from their writing conference, and they're going to create their final draft. So they're going to take their deeper drafts, they're going to use the feedback that you gave them, and then they're going to write their final draft. Or second final draft, I should say. Final draft content-wise. So they'll have 2 pages to do that, and that's lesson 9. Then lesson 10 is edit, energy, and final drafts. So that's page 13, 14, and 15 of the packet. I'll show you those. And so for this last lesson of the unit plan, they will look at this editing checklist. This is a checklist that I use in all of my unit plans because I think it's very cohesive and easy to follow. I am going to direct your attention to the second to last checklist or checkpoint because it says I have included in-text citations throughout my work if nonfiction. Because we are doing personal narratives, this does not pertain to most of your students' work. Now, if you have a student who was writing about snowmobiling, an event that happened when he was snowmobiling, and he wants to, or she wants to throw in a fact about snowboarding or snowmobiling, then they might cite that. But for the most part, this check isn't going to pertain to most students, so just point that out to them. They should have all the other check boxes checked. And so they're going to go through this editing checklist, make sure they don't have any punctuation or spelling errors, and then once they do that, they're going to take their feedback from the draft and they're going to rewrite it onto their final draft finale. And they get 2 pages for that. If they need more, just provide them some scratch paper, and then that is the end of lesson 10. They will turn in the entire packet, and you will use the rubric that they have in their packet and is also given to you to grade their final product. And that way you have a packet that shows the entire writing process, how they started and how they ended. And so you could use that if you need to for if you're doing like portfolio style conferences, or if you want to use this as kind of a benchmark for the beginning of the year and compare it to a unit plan at the end of the year. So it's just nice to have all of that together. That is what the materials look like and the lessons look like. Catch me in the next video and we'll wrap all of this up.